The celebration continued into the night and as well as in the morning. And the Stanley Cup went from West Broward to East and also took a little bit of a swim into the Atlantic Ocean.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Wednesday, June 26th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News, and you can follow me on X at Monoman12, follow the show account on X and Instagram at Elbo_FLA Panthers. And shout out to the everydayers who come back in here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. The playoffs are done, and the sports has stopped sporting like we've wanted them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So once again, Panther fans, the celebration continued for the Florida Panthers, as I'm sure a lot of you guys who are coming back here and listening to the podcast probably barely slept, and maybe were even if you had to report back to a job the very next day, maybe you were a little groggy going into that, and it's feels a lot better knowing when you go into your work environment, knowing what happened the night before with the Florida Panthers winning the Stanley Cup for the first time in their 30-year history. But it is a Wednesday, which means it is a Winans Wednesday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Jacob Winans is back here, and his first podcast appearance here since the clincher of the first championship in Florida Panthers history. And not only is he making an appearance on the show, but the man's already got his championship t-shirt and his hat. And Jacob, welcome back to the show, my friend. And very, very happy to have you here.
Man, I can't think of another time that I've been more excited to record an episode with you. This is absolutely surreal. It doesn't even feel like this is real life yet. It's unbelievable. I'm at a loss for words. We're almost 24 hours after the fact now, and it still feels fresh and brand new. It's hard to explain. This is the best time. And I'll also give you a quick shout out, looking like a whole new man without the playoff beard. We got a clean shave right after the game ended, so it's a brand new Armando.
Yeah, it took a little while to get all of it off. 67 days worth of facial hair for the postseason. And for me personally, there's this one video I've watched quite a few times, and I told myself that I need to stop watching it because I'm going to keep crying over and over again. It's the compilation video of all the fans celebrating the Florida Panthers' victory and all the jubilation and all the people. It's just going to bring me back those emotions for that. And it's to the point where it's like the eyes are pretty dry from it. And I'm sure a lot of you guys listening to this are feeling the same way. But Jacob, I want to give you the floor too on just the journey because we've had a lot of up and downs in our recaps, just preview shows. There are times where we didn't have a lot of hope too after some blunders with the Panthers, but I want to give you the floor too on just the Panthers winning Game 7 at home after almost surrendering a 3-0 series lead. So I want to give you the floor, my friend.
Yeah, if we had it our way, we could sit here and have this conversation for hours on end, and this would be the longest episode in the history of Locked On. The journey has been crazy. You could take it all the way back to early childhood with just my support and love for this team and this organization. So many years of disappointment and not making the playoffs, and thinking back to when I was in high school, like the 2017-18 team was so exciting, and that year was so special, and in Florida Panthers fashion, finished the season with the most points ever for a team to not make the playoffs. And we've seen some heartbreaking things. You think of Trocheck was tripped against the Islanders, which ironically, Kyle Pozo's on the ice for that. Berto Luongo's on the ice for that. Dmitry Kulikov was on the ice for that. They all just won a Stanley Cup together. If you would have told 16-year-old me back then that this day would come with that group together, I wouldn't have believed you. And just thinking back on the past couple of years, so there was so much hope. Dale Talon makes the big money signing in Sergei Bobrovsky. Doesn't go well to start, and people are ready to jump ship and bail him out. We discussed on this show different ways that the Panthers could either trade him or buy him out or get out from that contract, and what that would look like. We had those conversations because it had gone so south. Think of the excitement of the Joel Quenneville hire, and what happens when the Panthers finally hit their stride, and then Joel Quenneville loses his job, and how that could have completely rocked the boat and thrown the Panthers all the way off track. It didn't. Andrew Brunette comes in. The Panthers have a President's Trophy winning season. And then on this show, I've never been more dejected, and I don't think you have either than we were when the Panthers got swept in that series. The excitement before that, Claude Giroux, Ben Sherratt, the big swings at the trade deadline, we're all thinking this could be the year you get swept in the second round, and we were crushed. Last year is a magical run, and then the Cinderella story ends in the final against Vegas, which is extra sour given that Riley Smith, Jonathan Marchessault, former Panthers are on that team and are the ones to drive the nail in. There were so many times where it looked like the Panthers just isn't in the cards for this franchise, and this year has just been such an incredible journey. And every Panthers fan can date themselves and go back to when they first started watching and everything they've been through as fans, but it means so much to so many, and that just when the final buzzer went in Game 7, the weight was lifted off the shoulders of the players for sure, and the coach and Paul Maurice, but it was so validating for the region, for the fan base here, that this team, this franchise, this fan base, everyone here belongs, and hockey belongs here, and yes. they finally reached the top of the mountain.
And I think of some of our heartbreak that's happened in April and 2016 for John Tavares. I remember the exact date too. It was April 24th, 2016, on that day, for one of the biggest, one of the painful moments, at least in my time of being a fan. And then you mentioned 2018. Let's not forget that last game, Game 82, was a makeup game because of the snow, because of a reschedule due to a snowstorm back in, I believe it was January in Boston, and still that game not meaning anything because the Panthers were eliminated the day before too. And from that to coaching change and everything, and also from that, and also August 7th, 2020, that was when the Panthers also lost to the Islanders in the qualifiers. And that was the last game before Bill Zito was hired, and then making the trade for Patrick Hornquist, even though he wasn't on this specific team for the Panthers. Just the start of something of identity change of a group that's not going to be pushed around anymore. And then drafting Anton Lundell, his Bill Zito's very first pick, and also the impact of the Stanley Cup final here of who's watching and how many eyes are in it. Stephen A. Smith was in the building. He talks about on First Take, all he knows about hockey is the puck is black. He says that all the time on the show. Reggie Wayne, former Miami Hurricane, who even admitted that he didn't know the rules of hockey. Dan Orlovsky, who wore a Panthers shirt on the Pat McAfee show where it looked like it was colored in crayon too. And also the peak viewership too of 7.7 total viewers, the most in a matchup of a non-original six team too. And when you learn more about what this team was made of for the Florida Panthers, they stopped 5 100-point players: Kucherov, Panarin, Pastrnak, Draisaitl, McDavid. And then when you think about the last 40 years, we spoke about the most recent team to lose a Stanley Cup and then win. The very next year, we spoke about the 2009 Penguins. But also for the Florida Panthers, this is also 40 years that they're kind of making history, because the last team before that 2009 Penguins team was the 84 Oilers after they lost to the Islanders too. So it just goes to show what kind of rare territory the Panthers are in when it comes to bouncing back and winning the Stanley Cup. Because like I said, if they lost on Monday, it's hard to get back a third time. Tampa Bay made 3 straight cups, but they won 2 before losing that one. So the loss doesn't sting as much. And getting back there, I would it's a little bit of a different mindset when you've won when going into 3 straight versus if you've lost, obviously. But just the overall story of the Panthers just getting there and all the obstacles that they been through too. So that's the most impressive part about all of this too, when it comes to just the Panthers and just an overall turnaround with their franchise. And this region, it's come a long way from a lot of hope to now being victorious and just continuing to just being on the map of this sport of hockey. So, but let's but there has been an announcement for the Panthers where there has been a announcement of a parade. We spoke all about the parade of guessing when it is going to be, and this will be a good time to transition over to segment number 2, where we're going to discuss that more and the parade route, where it's going to start, where it's going to end, and more on the players' day with the cup. We're going to discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and it's summertime and the playoffs have winded down, and I love sports. I love them so much that you never want them to stop. And there's fewer games, and now the sports aren't sporting like we want them to. But FanDuel, it lets you keep going whenever you want. All you have to do is open the app and dream up the bets anytime you're in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a total boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Segment number 2 here on this Wednesday, June 26th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel, program free every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you the can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, Jacob, we have an announcement of a parade. So the parade is going to be this Sunday, June 30th, and it's going to start along the highway of A1A. Will begin on Rio Mar Street and travel south past the Elbo Room to Fort Lauderdale Beach Park on Southeast 5th Street across from Hotel Marin. And the reason why it is on Sunday is because tomorrow's the Board of Governors, Thursday's the NHL Awards, Friday's round 1 of the NHL entry draft, Saturday is rounds 2 to 7, and then Monday is free agency. So how excited for you, my friend, about the parade, my friend?
Oh man, I can't wait. I will definitely be there. We've waited so long to have a parade here for the Panthers. We've seen the Miami Heat have a parade. I wasn't here in the region at the time, and I would have been too young to remember probably, but the Marlins have won. The Heat have done it a couple times. The Dolphins have, of course, won Super Bowls in the past. This was the missing link. And this is going to be awesome. But what I'm most excited about where this parade is concerned is just, I know people outside of our region love to throw the term bandwagon around, and they love to throw the term front runner around and all that stuff. I really don't care, because you can't find me any team anywhere ever that has not grown its fan base from winning. Every single team that has a big fan base has won at some point and sustained winning at some point. which has earned the interest of their fans, and that's how you make lifelong fans. So if the Panthers ever, and every team does, and when the Panthers eventually do have their downward trend and their window closes, I'm not convinced that these fans will go away.
I agree.
These are fans that have seen a winning product, and once you're a part of that, it's hard to let that go. And whether your team is good or bad, and I think every fan base grows from winning. So I won't put anyone down for joining at a time when the Panthers are hot, because that's when you gain the most interest as a team. So what I'm most excited for with this parade is seeing all of the familiar faces, but all of the new faces, the people who are coming out for the first time, getting to know the team at this parade. It's going to be awesome. Post game, I mean, we talk about this all the time. It really gained popularity with the Heat, but the pots and the pans banging in the street. Who would have ever thought that the Panthers would win a Stanley Cup and the streets of Hialeah would be flooded with people banging pots and pans? I mean, that is incredible to think about. It's West Palm all the way down to Dade County. It's everybody is behind the Panthers right now. You can't leave the house without seeing Panthers jerseys and hats and team merch and flags flying. It's insane. I went to Wawa yesterday, and the employees at the gas station are wearing Panthers jerseys with their name tags on top, and everyone is in the parking lot partying, and someone's playing Panthers Pulse, the goal song, at the gas pump, and I'm like, this is insane. I never would have thought that I'd see that 5 years ago, 10 years ago. This would have been unheard of. So I can't wait for the parade, because it's gonna really show that this fan base has grown, and it's reached across the entire South Florida region. It's not just Sunrise. It's not just Broward. It's everybody. Everybody's on board now, and this team deserves it. But this region, this franchise, this fan base deserves it. It's not just 6 of us anymore.
And speaking of 6, check out the amount of people, if you haven't seen this already, of who followed the team to the beach this morning at 8 a.m. around there. The players didn't sleep, obviously. I barely slept. So all the getting beer and then pouring it from the second floor of the Elbo room and then taking a swim into the beach. Florida men swim with the Stanley Cup in the Atlantic Ocean. Well, that's going to be the title of this show. So that is definitely as Florida as can be. And then for everyone gathering all together and in that moment. And then there's also a video that surfaced on the internet of Barkov's old neighbor who moved, and then Barkov surprised him at his new residence at 4 a.m. with the Stanley Cup. So it just goes to show it's more than just the people in the arena, but it's just the people around you who cheer for you, that you walk by every day too. And also around like 1 or 2 o'clock, Fort Lauderdale police put out an alert about pedestrian traffic too in East Broward County. Like, that's incredible. I would have expected a party, but I wouldn't have never expected it to be in the point of shutting down streets for pedestrian traffic. Maybe cars, but not pedestrians.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I think it's one of the reasons the Stanley Cup is so huge is and such a relief is that we don't have to hear that the Panthers are a franchise with no cups anymore. That's obviously huge, but also we just dealt with for years so many attendance jokes and fan support jokes and relocation rumors and the lowest Forbes franchise valuation and just all of these things that came from low ticket sales and bad product on the ice. And then the Panthers, because they weren't making money, weren't spending to the cap, and it just creates this cycle of not being able to put a competitive team out there. And ownership deserves a ton of credit because they just got sick of it. And they took a risk and decided, we're going to spend to the cap. We're going to spend on coaching. We're going to hand out big contracts. We're going to lock up our guys long-term that deserve to be here and pay them the money they deserve. And it's paid off now. We're
going to create a goalie excellence department too.
A goalie excellence department. We're going to build a new practice facility that's state-of-the-art. And they really invested in the product, and it's paying off now. And it's so validating. It's such a huge validation, but for the fans, shutting down streets the day after the Stanley Cup, and a massive parade coming, and the players couldn't even. I don't know if you saw the video, but Matthew Tkachuk and Brady Tkachuk I couldn't even tell who else is on their golf cart, had to make a Grand Theft Auto escape out of the Elbo room because there were so many people following behind them. They're
recognizable now. If they weren't already,
absolutely.
They sure are.
Matthew Tkachuk certainly knows. Certainly is one of us now. He knows how to get the people going in South Florida. He just go to the Elbo room. But it's awesome because for so long we heard about how this fan base doesn't support the team, and there's not enough interest. You can't even make that claim anymore with a straight face, because this region has turned out in full force for this team before and after winning this cup.
Yeah, and then you talk about Matthew Tkachuk, and also he spoke about how, shout out to the people in Calgary, he couldn't let Edmonton win. So it's like, yes, you're continuing on. You know, he knows how to read the room for that. And then you just mentioned ownership and investing, but also what ownership decided to do, and not doing the whole show your license and we'll give you Florida license and we'll get you a free ticket. So that's another change that in the structure of how they were gonna do ticket sales and attendance too. So that's another thing, because when they made that change, the numbers actually reflected it, but they were more accurate on what they were. So that gave them more of a baseline of what the next step was going to be in order to build something too. And Vinnie Viola did say that he is going to take the cup to West Point. So that's another cool thing. You have more memorial that is dedicated to the military, and also for him to bring it to West Point. So that is going to be a big honor for him personally, for him too. And once again, it's interest for this fan base in not only in we spoke about the people wanting to play the game, but it's also interest outside of just Florida Panthers hockey, just viewership with the NHL that's going to come from this. And actually, we're going to continue that conversation, and we'll do that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Segment number 3 here on this Wednesday, June 26th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Winans Wednesday edition of the show. And Jacob, outside of just fans wanting to buy equipment to wanting to play, I think of more of the conversation. You spoke franchise value in the last segment. The last thing I saw for Panthers and franchise value was a Forbes article from December 14th, where it had the Panthers 29th, with the Tampa Bay Lightning and winning 3 cups in the last 20 years. Their franchise value at that time was 13th. And maybe not the biggest market that won a cup recently that upped their value is the St. Louis Blues. They're at 22nd. With the sales of the Coyotes and the Senators recently, obviously that number is going to go up. But as far as ranking, with the interest for the Panthers, and now that they've built something sustainable, that's going to go up for them too. And also, if the NHL ever changes the rule where we have to have one representative at the All-Star game, even if there's not a Panther representative, with what this cup, winning the Stanley Cup, has done, you're going to see interest not only in the Florida Panthers, but the league at large for them. And international hockey too, that's coming back, because the NHL has not been in the Olympics since 2014. Four Nations face-off is next year, replacing the All-Star game, and then the Olympics going for them too. So that's another thing that is very important about this Stanley Cup championship for the Florida Panthers, is interest and people talking about, the casual fan talking about different players from different teams too, that they probably didn't know months ago.
Yeah, so there's 2 levels to this, and one there's the local growth, and that can't even be disputed right now, because this team has never been more marketable. We're talking about a team that in 3 consecutive years has won a President's Trophy, made a Stanley Cup appearance as an 8th seed and became the Cinderella story of sports at the same time as the Miami Heat, captured the entire sports world's attention. And then this year, you come back as a redemption story and win the Stanley Cup in Game 7. And for better or worse, it definitely stressed us out, but they absolutely drove viewership through the roof by blowing a 3-0 lead. Let's be honest. There were absolutely a ton of people tuning into Game 7 to see, is this team about to have the greatest collapse in the history of pro sports? And that was terrifying, but it also generated interest. And we can be honest about that now because we got the win. And I will say it was scary and it was stressful, but it definitely generated interest. So there's that local growth component because you never know who you talk about. A guy like Austin Matthews, for example, grew up in Arizona, and he happened to be in the building when Alex Ovechkin scored arguably the greatest goal of his career, the diving goal where he scores behind his head while laying on his back. And Austin Matthews still talks about that to this day, and how he fell in love with hockey going to Coyotes games of all places. We won't know until 10, 15, 20 years from now, maybe less, maybe longer. We won't know until in the future what kids here in South Florida gain their interest in hockey from watching this championship team, from watching this Stanley Cup run. Maybe a kid from South Florida becomes the next NHL superstar because that young kid fell in love with hockey watching this Panthers team, and that's tangible growth. That's something that really, really means something, not just to South Florida, but to the sport as a whole. Because if there's no Austin Matthews, that's a big blow to the sport. And he fell in love with hockey because of the Coyotes. The next Austin Matthews could come from South Florida who fell in love with hockey because he watched the Panthers lift the cup this year. And that's really special. So when we talk about local growth, you can't overlook that. And I want to give a quick shout out to Anthony Duclair, who right now is actually down here in South Florida, still growing the game in Coral Springs with his development camp for youth players, which is incredible to see. So the local growth is an investment. But like you said, the eyes on the sport in general as a whole, with international hockey coming back, the Panthers will be well represented there. Barkov is the best Finnish player in the world. Matthew Tkachuk will absolutely be a Team USA mainstay. Guys like Sam Reinhart, I can't imagine Reinhart would be left off of Team Canada if the tournament started today. Gus Forsling is a lock for Sweden. There's so many guys. I think there's a ton of guys on the Panthers who have made a name for themselves. You think maybe even Anton Lundell or Etu could crack Team Finland. There's a lot here talent wise for the Panthers to that'll represent the team and the sport on the international stage. And just the Panthers have really become a marketable franchise with some marketable players like Matthew Tkachuk. He's probably one of the most relatable and outgoing people that the Panthers have ever had, arguably the most relatable and outgoing person the Panthers have ever had. He's pouring beer from the Stanley Cup into random fans' faces at Elbo room. I mean,
I was hurt, by the way.
Yeah, from the second floor, beer right to the eyes at 9 a.m. That's can't feel good, but it's coming from the Stanley Cup, so I don't think anyone's complaining. But who wouldn't want to be a fan of the crazy guy splashing around in the ocean with the Stanley Cup? I mean, that's marketable. That looks cool.
I'd at least put some goggles before attempting to.
Yeah.
So just
bring your goggles to the parade just in case.
Yes.
Chucky starts dumping beer on you.
And also another thing for this team is they have a lot of superstars, but it's not really someone like taking over too. And when you think about the Conn Smythe and it going to McDavid too, as Panther fans, we don't care. And honestly, with McDavid winning the Conn Smythe, I think it's more of a compliment to how complete the Panthers are as a unit, as a team, and their overall build too. Because the NHL awards, like we mentioned earlier, they're on Thursday. Bob's not going to win the Vezina. It's going to go to Connor Hellebuck more than likely. What a season that he had too for him, but also just the different guys who didn't work out in other places. I mean, we spoke about Vinnie Viola, what he's going to do with the Stanley Cup. I mean, Sam Bennett he spoke about eating Captain Crunch with his dad. That's what he's going to do. He pictured it at 6 years old too. Just a moment that he's going to have there. Jonah Gadjevich having his twins inside the Stanley Cup. Gus Forsling, which Jonah Gadjevich, his wife is Spencer Martin's sister too. So a little bit of a hockey relation there for in the NHL sphere for that. So it's just another great moment on what, and I'm very excited to see where each individual takes the cup, the multiple countries that it's going to go to. And we're going to take a deeper dive on where it's been before, and also discuss more about if it's going to go to a new place for the very first time. So very excited about future content there for the Stanley Cup, but also for the Panthers and just getting this. Speaking of individual guys and the whole team, I mean, you talk about Forsling. He was a plus 56 in the regular season too, and just now I think he has the underrated title for the Panthers too in this one.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the Panthers, their play style is not sexy. I think you could say maybe that Game 7 it was more like the Patriots Rams Super Bowl on who's going to get that next goal. Where it's very low event, and it's crazy because also if the Panthers blew a 3-1 lead, it would have been comparisons to 28-3 too for that. So that's another thing for just the brand of hockey for the Panthers. But continuing on the conversation of fan engagement, the Orlando Solar Bears in the month of June announced the preseason game that's going to happen for the 5th time at Kia Center, formerly known as Amway Center. Last time we were there, Jacob, maybe it was about 90% full. Obviously, more Lightning fans than Panther fans because it's closer to Tampa. But number one, I think it's going to be closer to 100%. And number two, I think it's obviously I don't think the Panthers are going to outnumber, but I think it's going to be closer to more to getting it closer to even then.
Yeah, and I think what's really telling about that is if you got the email or the press release from the Orlando Solar Bears, which I did, given that I obviously, like you, had been living in Orlando, they marketed this. The email that went out said, join us at Kia Center as the Tampa Bay Lightning host the Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers. They're marketing this game, this preseason game, as the Panthers are the marquee team coming to town. They're the Stanley Cup champions, and you should buy your tickets because the Stanley Cup champs are here. We've never been in that position, and it is awesome. It's a little bit sweeter given that it's against Tampa, and Tampa is playing host to the Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers. We've been on the other side of that. Mm-hmm. But it's super, super cool that the Panthers are the marquee team. And whenever the Panthers are in town, people are showing up to see the Stanley Cup champs. And we talk about marketability. We talk about value. We talk about growth. You see it in something as simple as that. They're recognizable. They're a team that's now a champion, and they draw eyes. They draw attention, and they put butts in seats. To an old school, just to say it in an old school way, the Panthers are box office. You want to show up to see them, and the way they played Game 7 was so Florida Panthers, just low scoring, but you can't take your eyes off of it because the defense is so fun to watch. They're so physical, strong. They're so fast, and it comes down to one play. I mean, if you think about it, that game came down to one play. Edmonton is inches from scoring a goal to take the lead. Kulikov saves it, and the Panthers go up the other way and score off the rush. And the Panthers that's so much of their identity. It's sometimes it seems like they're playing with fire, and they're on the knife's edge between winning and losing. And someone makes that one crazy effort defensive play that leads to a chance the other way, or keeps you in the game, or whatever the case may be. And that's just what the Panthers do, and it's so exciting to watch. It's stressful, it's exciting, and it's not always the high scoring, high flying action with this team, but it's all the other things that you can appreciate. And I thought Game 7 was exactly what the Panthers are all about. And yeah, I loved it. I could watch that. I will watch that game so many more times in my life. I'll probably show my kids and grandkids highlights of that game. And it's it was special to see. But I think the Panthers really put their identity on display, and it's an identity that can draw fans and they can draw eyes. And whether you like it or not, you can't look away from it. You don't have to like the Panthers to be entertained by it. This team, and I'll say this: you mentioned their style, how it's not sexy, it's not flashy, it's not high scoring, but it's gritty, and it's so many of the things you like about the sport. Like Barkov, for example, most takeaways in a Stanley Cup playoff since the stat was tracked.
34.
34 takeaways. You hold the best scorer, probably the most talented individual in the history of the sport, to 0 points in the last two biggest games of his career. That takes so much, and it's a system, it's a style, it's an identity, and this team's going to look very different roster wise, literally in a week.
Crazy,
but which is tough to think about. This season went on so long, but
and we got to say goodbye. What?
Yeah, in a week, this team's going to look really different, but the system won't, and that's what makes me think this is sustainable, because there's a system and an identity here now, that whoever goes and whoever comes in, you fit that system and that identity, and this train keeps moving.
Yeah, and then defensive structure led by Barkov, and it's crazy to think that a guy that he models his defensive game under, in Pavel Datsyuk, he just got inducted to the Hall of Fame, too. Nominated, but he will be inducted in November. So that's another thing for Barkov, and just the example that he continues on both ends of the ice for the Panthers too. And just with it being different, it's for me, it's going to be thanks for the memories. And also, before we sign off here, you spoke about watching Game 7 over and over again. I haven't watched it again yet, but I'm going to think about that play of Forsling, Montour, and Etu collapsing on McDavid to take away that quality chance on Sergei Bobrovsky, because there's a few sporting events that I've seen over and over again. There's the 8th inning of 2006 game in the NLCS in 2003, Marlins Cubs, the Bartman game. Game 6, funny enough, another Game 6, 2013 Miami Heat, the Ray Allen shot, that fourth quarter. I've watched the entirety of that fourth quarter many times, and now it's going to add another one for South Florida sports history in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final. So those are just things that you're going to rewind over and over and over again, and I'm very excited to see those. And like I said, show future generations of South Florida hockey and just how the Panthers got here too. But Jacob, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. The celebration continues as the Panthers go into the week as Stanley Cup champions and into the summer as Stanley Cup champions. And I'm very excited for what's next, leading up to next week and even to the celebration going into Sunday at the parade. Tell everybody where they can follow you online, my friend.
Yep, you can follow me on X at Jacob Winans 8. You can definitely find me at the parade somewhere in the crowd. And I'll be here. I'll be here all off season while we recap this as much as we possibly can and look forward to next year. And man, we freaking did it. This is a Stanley Cup champion.
Yep. Locked On Stanley Cup champions. That's so sweet to say. But Jacob, thank you so much, my friend, and I will see you next time.
Can't wait. See ya.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on Locked On NHL Network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone, and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Jacob Winans, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.